Rudresh Mahanthappa, thank you for joining Jazz Club Jury here at April Jazz.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a mess, right? Well, you know, the reality is my parents came to the U.S. in the 50s. My dad came there to do his PhD at Harvard. Okay. And they had already settled in Boulder, Colorado. It just so happens he was on a sabbatical year the year I was born, so he was doing research in Italy, and I guess the fine weather and the romantic spirit, maybe, you know. So that's the reason. I mean, being born in Italy is actually a little blip, because I was back in Boulder, you know, 2 or 3 months later or something like that.
When did you realize you wanted to be a jazz musician?
That's a good question. You know, I think maybe I hadn't said it out loud, but I was certainly thinking about it in 9th grade, which means, what, like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, something like that.
Were there any major jazz influences at home?
Well, I had a really great teacher from the very beginning. So he is still a great saxophonist himself, but he also, you know, he loaned me a lot of albums. Every lesson he came over, he brought over different albums, and I was exposed to a lot of music, a lot of different music all at once. So I think the music that I first heard that made me really want to play was more kind of jazz rock fusion, like David Sanborn or the Yellow Jackets, or Grover Washington Jr. especially, more kind of on the soul R&B side of instrumental music. And then of course I heard Charlie Parker, and then it was, you know, it was kind of over at that point. But you know, in 9th grade I started my own band, and I was trying to write music and trying to play Charlie Parker tunes, and I've always led a band since I was in 9th grade, you know, so I think I was always thinking about doing this for real, but
Did you always want to be a band leader?
I think it just went hand in hand. I mean, you know, my joy of this career path is not only playing the saxophone, it's the act of performing for people, and writing music, and creating, you know, scenarios that come to, musical scenarios that we call tunes or compositions, and seeing them come to life and manifest in myriad ways. So,
was it easy combining your transnational background with jazz?
Well, I mean, it's a larger question than that, because the music is really more of an expression of identity. It's an expression of who I am. So I think the larger question is really like, how hard was it to come to terms with being Indian American and what that means? So, and that was difficult. I mean, I grew up in a primarily white community in Boulder, and I think it was easier to just consider myself white. Sure. And then, you know, when I went to university, I went to a school first that had a very significant African American population. So I think at that moment I realized that I wasn't white, because I said, I'm certainly not black and I'm certainly not white, so who the heck am I, you know? And I think that kind of started the journey of trying to define what it means to be Indian American, not only for myself, but, you know, I consider myself part of the first major wave of children of Indian immigrants that have had a significant impact on the American cultural landscape. So music was just a way of expressing that. So in that sense, it was difficult, and I think exploring that line where these two things come together has been as enriching for me personally as it has been for, you know, for the sake of the music. I mean, a major aspect of all of this is to avoid exoticism and really create something that's a seamless hybrid. There's so many ways we see Indian culture just, you know, used in very superficial ways that are actually insulting and actually don't do South Asians any good, So I think trying to figure out how to do that effectively has been the hardest thing, and then seeing that process grow as well with various manifestations, different instrumentations, different compositional strategies and ideas, and even the band I'm here with today is kind of the next step in how I see that this integration of the culture of my ancestry and the culture of the present.
When did that meeting point of jazz and Indian music start for you?
Where it kind of flips over.
Yeah, where that tipping point was.
I think the tipping point was in 1994. I played a jazz festival in India, and it was the very first time I was going to India as an adult, and the very first time I was going without my parents. On top of the fact that it was the first time I was going with an instrument in my hand, And I saw some music on that, I saw some concerts on that trip that absolutely blew my mind. And I think that was when I started thinking about how these things can come together.
Was it Indian classical music?
Absolutely, yeah. It was one of these all-night concerts, that starts at sunset and goes until sunrise. And I didn't really know at the time that I was seeing some really amazing kind of living legends. Parveen Sultana's Hindustani singer, Chiti Babu on Veena, who has since passed away, I believe. And some of the Shakti guys, Vikku Vinayakaram and Selva Ganesh, and and all this music just kind of erupted in front of me, over the course of 10 hours. And I think I came back a very different person. I went to the record store in Chennai the next day, or no, in Bangalore the next day, and I just bought as much stuff as I could, And actually, my very first album, which is out of print, which is called Yatra, is kind of the first sort of experiment of trying to, at a very infantile level, trying to merge some of these concepts. And, it's also important to note that even the albums I was making with very standard jazz instrumentation of piano, bass, and drums, still, there are many kind of compositional devices that are coming straight from Indian music, even though I don't have a mridangam or a tabla or a drone or something like that,
Kadir Gopalnath.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you about him. How did you guys meet?
How did we meet? That's funny. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I first got one of his albums. My older brother gave me an album of his probably in '93. And obviously it blew my mind because I couldn't believe somebody was playing Carnatic music on the saxophone. And it was great for me because I could hear it on my instrument, and kind of relate to it in a different way instead of trying to imitate what the singers and violinists were doing and the flute players. I mean, saxophone is a different animal. It doesn't allow for what those instruments allow for in some ways.
He was quite innovative, though.
Absolutely.
The sax wasn't even part of Indian classical music.
Not at all, yeah. I mean, he's actually really fought the good fight for the saxophone. I mean, I think he still is up against the establishment in a lot of ways, even though he's, somewhat of a celebrity, There's a hardcore fundamentalist, Carnatic music movement that doesn't regard what he does as valid, so. But anyway, so when I went in '94, I tried to find him, and I couldn't find him. And when I went in '98, I tried again and couldn't find him. After I moved to New York, I saw that he was doing a U.S. tour, and he wasn't playing in New York, but he was playing in Boston. So I drove up to Boston to see him. And I went backstage after the concert. The concert was amazing. And he was so blown away by the fact that there was a South Indian jazz alto saxophonist. I mean, he kept looking at me. He said, "You play saxophone?" I was like, "Yeah, I do, And he loved my name. My name has very powerful, Hindu roots. And so we traded albums. I gave him a copy of my current album, my second album, current album at the time was called Black Water. And to this day, I'm not sure if he ever listened to it. But I said, hey, maybe we could do something together sometime. And he loved the idea based on just this vibe that we had. And
kinsman with it.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And, that album came out in 2008, but that project actually started in 2005. So there was quite a ramp up to that, yeah.
Improvising has been a big part of Indian music.
Absolutely.
For at least a couple of thousand years. How do you compare the techniques used in Indian classical music to that of jazz improvisation?
Well, the point of departure is quite different because, well, let's see. Well, I think it's important to understand that the act of interaction, improvisation being an interactive act, you know, is common to both musics, and I think that's kind of the joy, you know, when you see the violinist and the mridangam player kind of playing off of each other and intertwined. I mean, that's the same feeling I have of, you know, Charlie Parker and Max Roach, or Coltrane and Elvin Jones, or something. But the foundation is different because there's no harmony in classical Indian music. You don't have chords, you know. Chords are a very Western thing. You have melody and rhythm, you know. And really, you have kind of a polyphony because you have melodic accompaniment, you know. You have another single note instrument accompanying you. Whereas, you know, in jazz, oftentimes you have a piano or you have a guitar, you have... so that implies a whole other set of concepts that I think are kind of alien to Indian classical music. But I think a lot of the rhythmic devices can correlate.
You began life with pianist Vijay Iyer.
Right.
How similar, if at all, is your musicality?
Well, I mean, we're influenced by, we have similar influences, and the way we met actually was through Steve Coleman, who's an amazing alto saxophonist. And so Steve actually introduced us because I was attending a workshop where I was kind of studying with Steve, for lack of a better, you know, term. And Vijay was playing in a new band of Steve's. This is probably 1994, maybe 95. So, I mean, we were completely fascinated by the existence of each other, because not only had we never met another Indian American jazz musician, but we were working with similar ideas and similar influences, and so we learned a lot from each other, and we also learned a lot together about how to kind of forge this path, and not only with music, but even as a career path. Like, how does the industry deal with an Indian American jazz musician, you know? Or do they just not deal with it, you know? And so, I mean, you know, I don't even think of Vijay as a collaborator. I mean, he's more like a cousin. I mean, you know, we've been playing together for 17 years, I think, and that's, I mean, I think many people are lucky to say that they've been playing with someone that long in this day and age. We haven't done anything in a while, but, you know, the constant in our musical relationship has been our duo. That's how we started, and our most recent work has still been that, you know. So, I mean, we both have a lot on our plates right now, so I think it'll come around again, and, you know, we'll try to... The duo is a little bit on hiatus, but I think we have an idea in the back of our heads to write some more music and maybe make an album in the next, you know, 3 or 4 years or something.
You were awarded the Guggenheim Award.
Right.
How did that allow you to explore your music?
Well, Sandhi came out of that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the real, I mean, that was the focus of the fellowship, was to take a couple of trips to India and work on some very specific concepts, and to also work on the electronic stuff, and just to have the time to do that. But it also gave me lots of fodder for, you know, a lifetime of ideas and projects and other things. I mean, I have all these tapes of lessons and concerts that I still need to kind of filter through and go back to again. And you know, I was fortunate to work with musicians who had great respect for where I was as a musician, even though I wasn't playing straight up Indian music, and where I could kind of fast track, like, okay, I don't understand how this raga works, show me this. And instead of saying, you must sing this raga every day, 8 hours a day for 6 months, and live in my house and serve me tea, and, you know, because I just don't have time to do that. I mean, if I had another life to spare, I would do that, but I don't, and I'm interested in too many things to do that. So
has Samdi evolved? It was recorded back in 2008.
It has evolved.
It was released in 2011.
Right, and we did a lot of playing in between too. Yeah, so it's really, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's all tied to the album. I mean, you see the through line, but the band is really on fire and taking the music, you know, some really different places. So yeah, it's an odd kind of model. I've never sat on something that long after recording it, but it's just kind of the way it turned out. There was another project I did called Apex with Bunky Green. Yeah, so the opportunity came up to do that, and the timing had to work just right to have Jack DeJohnette and Jason Moran and everyone involved there. So, so yeah, this got kind of put off, and I was also waiting for the right situation, label-wise and marketing-wise, that would. You know, I think Samdi has a reach beyond just like the jazz market, and I was trying to find a way for it to get out into the world in a larger way than maybe other things have.
It was great to chat to you, Rudresh. Thank you very much.
Definitely.
And look forward to seeing you on stage later tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.